last week, Brandon's Best Bets had its best week since we started doing this segment about 2 years ago on the Brands World podcast. My best bets went 5 4 5. And as a reminder, here were my picks. San Francisco -10 against the Giants Thursday night. Man, that was easy. How bad is Daniel Jones? New England -2.5 covering against the Jets. We knew it was going to be a bad game, but we knew New England was going to be able to cover. Then you had Detroit -3.5. Boy, did they take down Atlanta. Atlanta looked bad. Pittsburgh +2.5 against Vegas. I said you can't trust Jimmy Garoppolo. And obviously Philadelphia putting the pounding on Tampa Bay Monday night. Philadelphia covered the 5.5. So those were my 5 best bets for week number 3. I ended up going 11-5 in the money line. The games I missed. What about Indianapolis shocking Baltimore? Houston shocking Jacksonville. My worst pick of the week was the Commanders. I got that completely wrong. I was buying the Sam Howell hype, and then they obviously just got smashed by Buffalo. Arizona, upsetting Dallas, as well as the Chargers were able to pull that one out late against Minnesota. So those were the only games I missed in the money line. I went 11-5, 30-18 this year so far in the money line, as well as 11 for 15 in best bets. Last year at this time in the money line through the first 3 weeks, I was 24-24, so 6 games better. I was also 6 for 15 in best bet instead of 11 for 15. So we are off to a good start. I'm a little hot right now, but let's get into our week 4 NFL picks and best bets. Thursday night game here, really interesting. Lions are favored by 1.5 at Green Bay. We all know what happened the last time these two teams met up in this location. Week 18 last year, the Detroit Lions went into Green Bay and they ended Aaron Rodgers' run in Lambeau Field. This year's obviously a little bit different. I think the Lions were pissed off at the fact that they lost, on that heartbreaker to Seattle the week before. They came out and pounded Atlanta. Green Bay has played well the first 3 weeks of the season, but they were down 17-0 in New Orleans. Derek Carr goes down. Jameis Winston cannot move the ball for about a quarter and a half. Jordan Love gets hot, and even without Aaron Jones, even without David Bakhtiari, Green Bay's able to take advantage, come back, and be down 17-0 incredibly, win that game 18-17 thanks to the missed kick by Will Lutz. Listen, I don't know what to make of Green Bay. Some weeks Jordan Love looks great. Other weeks he looks okay. Other weeks he looks bad. I think it's what we were expecting from a young quarterback that, again, sat 3 years behind Aaron Rodgers. People forget Aaron Rodgers struggled in year 1 replacing Brett Favre. And then he obviously popped and became the generational talent that he is. I think the Lions are more consistent. I think they are a better coach. I think Dan Campbell's going to get his guys ready to go. I think the Lions are going to win this game. I'm not totally confident about it, though. I admit it. I could see Green Bay winning it. So, again, I picked the Lions, but I'm not betting the 1.5 spread. Next game, we're going to London for the Falcons and the Jags. Now, the Jags are technically the home team here, but it is on a neutral field. They're favored by 3 points. And this is one of my favorite bets of the week. Jacksonville knows London. They've always played well there. And they got embarrassed last week by Houston. Yes, it was a divisional rival, but they were like 8.5-point favorites, and they could barely move the ball. And over the last 2 weeks at home, Trevor Lawrence has struggled. I think that Atlanta's pass defense is not that good. I don't think their defense is good in general. I look for ETN to bounce back. I look for Kevin Ridley to bounce back. I look for Christian Kirk to bounce back. All with Trevor Lawrence. I think Jacksonville gets after Atlanta. I think Bijan Robinson could have a good game. They're trying to get Bijan and Drake London back on track. I said going into the year, I know Atlanta's 2-1. I don't trust them. I don't trust Desmond Ridder. I think Jacksonville wins this game, and I'm betting them -3. Next game, maybe the trickiest game to pick of the weekend, Baltimore at Cleveland. And I say that because obviously the Ravens lost to Indianapolis at home. They know that next week they also have to go to Pittsburgh. That's a very tough schedule where you go back to back on the road, divisional opponents at Cleveland, at Pittsburgh. I think they're going to be so physically beat up from the Cleveland game, they're not going to be able to win the Pittsburgh game. So I think Baltimore, who has always played Cleveland well, especially in Cleveland, Lamar Jackson, when he's healthy, has always done damage against the Browns. I know the Browns are favored by 2.5. And yes, the Browns have a different defense. And Jim Schwartz, led by Zadarius Smith, led by Myles Garrett, led by all those guys in the secondary. The Browns are having one of the best defensive seasons the franchise has had in forever. Until they beat Baltimore, though. You know, some teams are just bad matchups, like San Francisco, the Rams against Seattle. You know, we've seen various examples. Houston against Jacksonville. There's a Jacksonville for some reason can never beat Houston, but they match up well against Indianapolis. So I don't think the Browns match up particularly well against Baltimore. I think they match up better against Cincinnati. So I'm going to take Baltimore here. Not going to bet it because, again, I think it's possible the Browns could win by a field goal. But I'm going to take Baltimore. My real upset of the week, I would say here, Baltimore over the Browns in Cleveland. Next game, the Commanders are going to be mad after getting trounced by Buffalo, but they have to go on the road to Philly, where they were the team last year who defeated the Eagles, who were, 8-0, 9-0 at the time. They went in there on a Monday night. If you remember that game, Taylor Heineke played well. You know, Quez Watkins dropped a touchdown, then he fumbled. There was a lot of turnovers in that game. It was a weird game. Washington escaped with the victory after Alex Kemp called that personal foul penalty on Brandon Graham when Heineke went to the ground. So all of that here. Philadelphia hasn't even played their best football this year, yet they are 3-0. DeAndre Swift is second of the week in rushing after barely toting the ball in week 1. They've had a dominant week 2 and week 3. And what we've seen from, you know, New England, Minnesota, Tampa, they are playing a lot of double A-gap linebacker trying to muddy up the pocket of Jalen Hurts. So Philly is taking advantage of it, and with less down linemen, they are running the football down teams' throats. It'll be interesting here because the Commanders match up very well against Philly with their defensive line. You know, Montez Sweat, Chase Young, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen. They match up well. It'll be Philly's biggest test of the season to date up front. Again, divisional game. Anything can happen. I'm not going to bet it. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a closer game than people think. I would not be surprised if Washington hangs in there with Philly to the end. You know Sam Howell is going to play better. I think the Eagles do squeak out a victory, though, at Lincoln Financial Field. Next game, now Cincinnati bounced back, and I said last Thursday, the last podcast we did, if Joe Burrow was playing, I was going to pick the Bengals against the Rams. Joe Burrow did play. I picked Cincinnati. I was right. Burrow did not look great. They barely ran the ball with Joe Mixon, with Joe Burrow, who had an injured calf. I don't understand that, but Cincinnati's offense is explosive. Tennessee's offense is not, which is why the way they beat the Chargers just looks worse on Brandon Staley, because against New Orleans, they could barely move the ball. Against the Browns, they can barely move the ball. DeAndre Hopkins looks old. You know, we all didn't think that when he was looking for teams, but maybe that's the reason why teams didn't want to go get Dion. Maybe he's just old. Maybe he's not getting enough separation. And Ryan Tannehill is a dinosaur, and because of that, you can stack 9-10 in the box. They're not giving Derrick Henry any running room. And so for that reason, I think even with a bum leg, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, they haven't even got their full extent of the offense yet. But I think Cincinnati is going to be a little bit of a low scoring. They're going to run the football a little bit more, but I think they put up enough points. I don't think Tennessee can keep up with them. Again, I said it going into the year. I don't think Tennessee is a great team. I don't think they have great weapons. And so for that reason, I am taking Cincinnati. Though would it surprise me if Tennessee covers the 2.5? No, which is why I'm not betting it, because Tennessee, although like New England, is one of those unpredictable teams in the league. You just never know what you're going to get week to week. Okay, I have bet the Steelers every single week this year. I'm 2-1 on them. This week one against San Francisco, but I get the last two. They are favored by 3 here against Houston. I know Houston beat Jacksonville last week. For a young team like CJ Stroud going up against a defensive coach Mike Tomlin, they're going to give him different looks. The Houston offensive line is not great. They got to go up against TJ Watt and that Pittsburgh pass rush. I don't like the matchup here for Houston, though I do think Tank Dell gets some work. He's been a good rookie for them. Stroud has a good connection with him, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I think Pittsburgh wins. I think they cover the 3 points, and I'm once again betting Pittsburgh -3. Speaking of a game I'm betting, this may not be smart, but I don't love all the lines this week, and I'll tell you what. I am going to take Indy -1.5 to win and beat the Rams. And the reason why I'm going to take them to win and beat the Rams because I don't like the Rams offensive line. I don't like the way Stafford played Monday night. And I think Shane Steichen has these Colts believing. And I like the way the Colts played against Baltimore. And I like the way they look offensively. And I think that spread the ball out type offense with Anthony Richardson, the way Steichen ran with Jalen Hurts. They can run the ball with Zach Moss. I said they weren't going to miss Jonathan Taylor that much. They have a very good defensive line led by DeForest Buckner. Going into the year, I thought the Colts were going to be better than a lot of people thought. And the Rams, their offensive line's a mess. They still don't have Cup. You know, that Nwoku kid is pretty good, but I don't think he's special. And I just think Indy's able to run the football, and I think they're able to win a close ball game. Okay, this is the fireworks show of the week. We all saw Miami put up 70 points on the Denver Broncos. Now they got to go to Buffalo. And I said going into the year, these are the 2 teams destined to fight it out for the AFC East crown. And I'm going to take Buffalo here at home because I think they split throughout the regular season. I think Buffalo will win in Buffalo. I think Miami will win in Miami. I'm not going to bet it. Buffalo is favored by 3. If you cannot tell, by the way, I want a similar lines this week. I want a 2.5, 3-point line, some very close lines. I think Buffalo, though, understands how to play Miami. It's not like Denver. You know, they're not a divisional opponent. I think a lot like New England, when you play Miami twice a year, you're going to figure it out. And naturally, in my opinion, when you score 70 points, and you dominate like the way they did, unprecedented domination against Denver, which Denver was completely humiliated, which we'll talk about this next. It's why I do believe, in my opinion, that Denver is going to bounce back and beat Chicago. Both teams humiliated, though Denver more than Chicago. I just think Buffalo, you know, they have played well since that week 1 disaster. They know they let the Jets game get away from them. They've taken care of business against Vegas. They've taken care of business against the Commanders. They're running the football more with James Cook. Josh Allen is still making spectacular throws, but they're not asking him like they did week 1 to play hero ball. I think that continues, and to be honest with you, I think Buffalo has Miami's number. I think Buffalo matches up well against Miami in the secondary. For that reason, Buffalo at home. Next game, I already mentioned it. I got Denver bouncing back. I don't know who's going to watch this game. This is going to be comically entertaining to watch Russell Wilson versus Justin Fields to see who is the worst quarterback. I said going into the year, Chicago side. I would have not fired Matt Nagy. Matt Eberflus is the wrong defensive coach. They need an offensive coach to support Justin Fields, and it's just not happening. You know, they got blown out by Kansas City. The game wasn't even close. The DJ Moore edition, this is what concerns me. Usually, if you're a quarterback, we know Chicago did not have great weapons, but usually a great receiver like DJ Moore can fix whatever receiver problems you have, because usually a number 1 wide receiver takes the pressure off the number 2. It takes the pressure off the number 3. They're not running the football well. They're not throwing the football well. They cannot move the ball offensively. And until I see it happen, and the fact that Vegas has this and not even a pick 'em at Chicago -3, they have Denver on the road favored by 3.5, which means if this game was in Denver, they take Denver minus 6.5, which tells me Vegas thinks Denver is a better football team. They have played better in the first half than Chicago. They just have to clean up their second halves. And again, as embarrassing as the Bears loss was, at least they didn't lose 70-20. I think Denver bounces back in a big way. I think they beat Chicago. This next one is my survivor pool pick this week. Now, I don't know if I should bet this spread or not. It's an interesting game. You can't trust Minnesota to cover everything, but I like Minnesota to at least win and beat Carolina with Andy Dalton, who did play well last week against Seattle, and Thielen had a good game. But, some people like me expected Carolina to maybe make the postseason. We thought the Frank Reich, Bryce Young relationship would be better than what it was early on. Now Bryce Young's already hurt. They got some injuries on the defense side of the ball. It's not looking like it's going to be a good season for Carolina. For Minnesota, they still have Justin Jefferson. They have the young kid Addison. They have Alexander Madison. They have all of these offensive pieces. Brian Flores now is the defensive coordinator with Daniil Hunter leading that charge. Harrison Smith. They have the pieces. They have just lost a lot of close games. Minnesota's not as bad as an 0-4 team. It's why I said last week, Minnesota and the Chargers remind me so much of each other. Some years they're lucky. Some years they're not. Some years they make the playoffs. Some years they don't. And this year just kind of feels like a bad year for Minnesota, but they're not 0-4 bad. I think they get the win against Carolina. Now the Saints. Even with Jameis Winston, who's going to start for Derek Carr, who obviously suffered that shoulder injury, the Saints offense did not even look that good with Derek Carr in there. They have not looked that good all year, but we know they have Tampa Bay's number. And I said it going into last Monday night's game with those big Eagles defensive linemen. They're going to force Baker Mayfield to see over those defensive linemen and force him to make tough throws. And I didn't think Baker Mayfield could do it. This Saints defense is really good. Marshawn Lattimore is going to take Mike Evans. They're going to bottle Baker Mayfield up. New Orleans is going to win the game. I'm not going to pick them for a best bet because I don't know how much their offense is going to produce. It's Jameis Winston, obviously, against former team in Tampa, but I think the Saints win the game. Next game, we got Chargers and Raiders. Chargers at home. They're favored by 5.5. Now, we can't trust the Chargers to cover, which I'm not going to bet them. But the Chargers, out of all the teams in their division, they actually match up well with Vegas. Vegas, ever since that game against the Chargers a couple years ago when it came down to Sunday Night Football and the field goal, they have struggled against the Chargers. They struggled with them last year. Herbert was throwing the ball all over the yard. And I'm interested now. With new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, you just lost Mike Williams for the season, down with an ACL injury. We saw Keenan Allen put up massive numbers, just like Devontae Adams last week, put up massive numbers for Vegas, just like Jamar Chase put up massive numbers for Cincinnati, just like Mike Williams did for the Chargers. It was a big day for wide receivers in week 3. I don't want the Chargers secondary. They obviously have Derwin James. J.C. Jackson was out with these scratch. They really couldn't stop Justin Jefferson in Minnesota. So I think if Jimmy Garoppolo gets the ball on enough to Devontae Adams, they're going to be able to score points. I just don't see how this Vegas defense keeps up with the explosive Charger offense. We're expecting Austin Eckler to come back, and I think the Chargers win this game. Okay, now Arizona beating Dallas was a little bit of a shocker. I said I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona covered. The winning flat out is crazy. Maybe it's just Jonathan Gannon and a game plan on Dallas. Maybe Dallas took Arizona lightly, but we all know Arizona wants it up in the draft. We know they're not going to beat San Francisco. Listen, is there a chance Arizona covers? The large spread of 14, I think, is too much and 2 touchdowns. This game may be over by the second quarter and maybe at half. Who knows? San Francisco is going to only win the game, not going to spend a lot of time. What I do want to spend a little bit of time on is this interesting game in Dallas, because New England got their first win of the year last year, though it was not pretty. Their best offensive performance was week 1 against Philly, and that's not as much of a surprise anymore because Bill Belichick, Bill O'Brien, you have 6 months to plan. and scheme and study Philly and figure out week one. They have not looked good against Miami. They have not looked good against the Jets in their division. Dallas, the question for them is going to be, they don't have Trayvon Diggs, but against the New England receivers, are they going to be able to cover? Because they couldn't even cover Arizona receivers and Hollywood Brown last week, and they let Arizona run the football all over them. Ramondre Stevenson, Ezekiel Elliott, obviously, coming back to Dallas. New England ran the ball 35 times last week between Stevenson and Elliott against the Jets. Do they do the same? Do they ground and pound? Is this a low-scoring game like it was a couple years ago when they played in New England? Dak has to make a hero for a CD Lamb or somebody like that to win the football game in like a 20-16 scenario. Absolutely, I can see it. I'm not going to bet this game. I was thinking about taking New England plus the points because I think this game's going to be close. I think New England's going to run the ball. They're going to play defense. Mac Jones is not going to make mistakes. But in the end, they're not going to be able to keep up with Dallas's offense. Dallas is angry. They're mad. They're motivated. They'll play better at home. They'll get to 3-1 on the year. Okay, Zach Wilson can't pass. I don't care the Jets signed Trevor Siemian. I don't care about the Jets defense. I said it when Aaron Rodgers went down. The Jets season was over. If you think Zach Wilson's going to save the franchise, you're wrong. I think we all had a little bit of hope that because Zach Wilson looked so good in preseason with Rodgers by his side and telling him what to do, and Rodgers in training camp, and Rodgers being there with him, maybe Zach Wilson would be a different quarterback. That's not the case. Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, and Andy Reid, they're going to shake it off. If you get that reference there, Kansas City easily covers the 9.5. And then finally, Seattle at the Giants. The Giants are favored by 1.5, and the NFL has decided once again to put the New York Football Giants on prime time. And I don't understand it. I don't get it. Seattle is the better football team, in my opinion. I think that Geno Smith, Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, I think those guys, Seattle moves the ball on the Giants, who are not a very good football team. Pete Carroll, who's a defensive coach, going to strategize against Daniel Jones. This is the rare occurrence where I take a defensive coach over an offensive coach because of the quarterback on the Giants side. The Giants are just not good. Why the NFL thought the Giants were good because they won 9 games last year when everybody in the world who knows football was telling you the Giants are not that good. I don't get it. Seattle wins. They cover the 1.5. Seattle is my dog pick this week for best bets. So let's review MoneyLine picks. Detroit over Green Bay, Jacksonville over Atlanta in London, Baltimore over Cleveland, Philly over Washington, Cincinnati over Tennessee, Pittsburgh over Houston, Indy over the Rams, Buffalo over Miami, Denver over Chicago, Minnesota over Carolina, New Orleans over Tampa, Chargers over Vegas, San Fran over Arizona, Dallas over New England, Chiefs over the Jets, and then Seattle over the New York Football Giants, as they like to call themselves, on Monday night. My 5 best bets for week 4 in the National Football League, coming off a 5-for-5 week last week. Jacksonville -3 in London against Atlanta. Pittsburgh -3 against Houston. Indy -1.5 against the Rams. Kansas City on the road covering 9.5 against the Jets. And then my one dog of the week, Seattle Monday night +1.5 against the New York Giants. Like that clip from the Brands World Podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World Podcast right here on YouTube.